For centuries, the mournful songs of the whales have sailed across oceans, haunting and like otherworldly symphonies that were both foreign and somehow familiar. Mariners called them ghostly voices ringing through the deep, and poets equated them to wailing of old spirits. Scientists, intrigued but stymied, recorded and catalogued these sounds for decades, listening for the clicks, whistles, and mournful moans that traveled miles through the waves. To the human ear, they sounded lovely but incomprehensible, pieces of language that suggested purpose but refused to be understood. Were they just mating calls? Navigation signals? Something else, conversations, stories, outpourings of happiness, sorrow, or self. For centuries, the meaning lay secreted, an animal mystery that no human can guess. But now, for the first time in history, that mystery has begun to yield its secrets. With the aid of artificial intelligence, scientists have managed to decode elements of whale language, holding, at last, a conversation with a humpback whale that lasted 20 minutes. And what they discovered is nothing short of staggering. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. The miracle was not the result of one fortuitous test, but rather the culmination of years of hard work and teamwork. Huge recording initiatives were initiated worldwide, sending out hydrophones, submarine microphones, onto the huge tracts of the world's oceans. These sensors collected petabytes of information, a vast library of whale calls. All subtlety of sound was recorded, the deep, booming cries of blue whales that propagate through thousands of miles, the multi-tiered and constantly shifting humpback songs, the staccato clicks of sperm whales employed in echolocation and perhaps intricate social communication. To human scientists, the recordings were a huge puzzle with too many pieces and no picture on the box to serve as a model. There were patterns, but they refused to be grasped. Meaning flickered at the periphery of perception but never cohered. That was, until neural networks were developed at the cutting edge and trained to sort through data. Artificial intelligence, in the guise of sophisticated machine learning systems, turned the whole game around. Whereas human scientists could study tiny bits of sound at a time, AI could handle the vast ocean of information all at once, searching for correlations and repeating patterns buried in the noise. With time, order began to appear. The AI uncovered patterns in the wailing songs that had a syntax-like quality, grammar rules that humans utilize within language. Sounds took on different meanings based on their sequence, rhythm, and repetition. Changes emerged that were associated with particular pods or areas, proposing dialects similar to the language and accents of human societies. This was not instinct. This was communication with form, context, and depth. What had been nothing more than seemingly random noise was now identified as dialogue. The import of the discovery is deep. Whales, as it happens, are not just passing around simple facts such as food here or danger nearby. They are participating in multidimensional interaction that informs identity, purpose, and even perhaps emotion. In one astonishing example, researchers captured what the AI detected as a sort of greeting ceremony, individuals making distinctive sounds before heading into more advanced conversation, much as humans introduce themselves before they start to chat. The whales stopped, listened, and replied in a cadence that echoed the give-and-take nature of human conversation. For the scientists observing, it was nothing less than hearing the Rosetta Stone of the ocean unfold. Instantly, the sound of whales was no longer simply whispers in the dark. It was words, sentences, and tales. This finding dismantles countless assumptions regarding intelligence and communication in the non-human world. For millennia, humans have elevated themselves to the pinnacle of an intelligence hierarchy, primarily based on language. Our capacity to mold vague notions into organized speech, to document and pass along culture from generation to generation, was viewed as a defining characteristic that set us apart from all other life. But now, faced with the evidence that whales have a language system of their own grammar, syntax, and cultural diversity, that assumption starts to break down. These ocean giants are no longer passive beasts of nature. They are fellow living things with histories, traditions, and voices as complex in their own right as our own. That understanding makes us challenge the position of humanity in the intelligence tapestry. Communication is no longer an exclusively human talent. It is a common link between species. No less revolutionary are the real-world implications of this achievement. For the first time, we are poised to hold direct conversation with another species on Earth. Ponder asking a sperm whale where it migrates and hearing a comprehensible response. Imagine a humpback whale telling us of the thrill of plunging into the bottomless ocean abyss, of encountering perils we cannot see. Imagine thinking of the probability of avoiding whales having their say on people, our vessels, our drilling, our din. The notion might appear like science fantasy, but it is no longer beyond our horizon. Whale communication might change conservation altogether, making it no longer educated speculation but partnerships based on information from the whales themselves. They might inform us about what most imperils them, where they require protection, and how we might live with them. But this discovery also comes with heavy moral baggage. If whales actually have a language system similar to human culture, then they are not simply creatures to be conserved, they are entities with rights, voices, and traditions to respect. The perpetual onslaught of noise pollution emanating from shipping channels, Navy sonar, and industry assumes a sinister aspect when viewed in this context. These are not simply disturbances in the water. They are breaks in dialogue, silencing histories, wiping out traditions. Every interrupted call is not just a biological loss but a cultural one, akin to silencing human societies in the middle of a sentence. To recognize whale language is to recognize whale personhood, something that requires fundamental shifts in the way we interact with the oceans. The finding also recontextualizes how we understand the evolution of language itself. Scientists grappled for decades with whether language was a special human adaptation or within an overall continuity of animal intelligence. The discovery of whale communication as a rule-governed, structured system implies the latter. Language, so it would appear, can emerge where intelligence, memory, and social cooperation converge. The sea, with its immense distances and use of sound as the prevailing sense medium, offered whales an ideal habitat in which to develop sophisticated vocal cultures that stretch thousands of miles. This insight makes one wonder what other creatures might have similar secrets. Dolphins, elephants, even birds could possess systems of communication that are breathtaking in their complexity, waiting only for the introduction of AI to tease them out. The true frontier of interspecies conversation might have just begun. The psychological resonance of the find also weighs heavily. When scientists first listened to decoded whale communications, they were not only struck by the mechanics of how these were done but by the pathos of the interactions. Some calls seemed associated with play, others with care, and some with what looked like grieving. To understand that whales mourn, play, and tend to each other in ways we can now decode stirs a kinship beyond science. It speaks to some deep thing within the human heart, the desire to be near, the ache to not be alone in the loneliness of the universe. It is one thing to be aware that whales sing. It is another to be aware that they are communicating experience, joy, and loss in their own language. At the same time, the discovery demands humility. For all our technological triumphs, it took artificial intelligence to finally show us what whales have been saying for millennia. Their voices flowed across the oceans long before humans walked the earth, and they will likely continue long after us. AI did not invent this language, it merely revealed what had always been there. This is a reminder that advancement does not necessarily come from dominating nature, but from paying attention to it more intently. The whales were always speaking. We were just not listening. The cultural significance radiates outward. Whales have long held a position of intrigue within human myth and art, being depicted as keepers of the deep or emblems of wisdom. Now, those myths no longer seem so fanciful and instead are more like acknowledgement of reality. We have always yearned to be linked with the other, whether in hopes of extraterrestrial life or stories of mystical creatures. The astounding irony is the other we looked for in the cosmos has existed here on Earth all along, singing to us within the oceans that blanket the majority of our world. To decipher whale language is to understand that we are not alone in the blessing of words. The oceans are filled with voices. We are only now starting to listen. Philosophically, what we have learned compels us to redefine our concept of personhood. For centuries, attributes such as intelligence, consciousness, and communication were deemed uniquely human. But whales are all these. They create societies, pass along tradition, and now we learn, communicate in languages of depth. This obscurity of human from animal demands that we give moral consideration far further than we once thought. Silencing whales is no longer simply environmental destruction. It is the erasure of culture, the obliteration of civilizations that live beneath the surface. To speak with whales in their own language is to recognize their equality in a manner observation alone never could. At a scientific level, the methods that were developed to crack the code of whale language are a revolution in artificial intelligence. The models needed to deal with enormous complexity, making distinctions between subtle differences of sound, translating meaning into context, and recognizing structures undetectable to the human ear. This ability has implications far beyond the field of marine biology. The same techniques might eventually crack the code of other species' communication, or even find structured messages in the universe. Whales, in that case, become not just objects of inquiry but ambassadors, instructing us in how to hear beyond the species' boundary and maybe even beyond planets.